Good morning, and thanks for joining us today. I'm Carlos Phillips, President and CEO of the Greenville Chamber. We host these Community Matters discussions the second and fourth Tuesday of each month to connect you with local, state, and national leaders. You can find past recordings as well as the upcoming Community Matters schedule at greenvillechamber.org. Before we go deep into today's program, got to have a couple of reminders for you. First, all attendees should be on mute with your cameras turned off. And feel free to submit questions through the chat feature. We have a lot of folks on today's call. So I think we'll have a few questions. So please feel free to submit those via the chat feature. Today, I'm joined by fellow members of the Race Equity and Economic Mobility Commission leadership team. To guide us through this important discussion today, we have Meghan Barp, who is President and CEO of the United Way of Greenville County, the Honorable Judge Merl, and David Lominack, South Carolina Market President for TD Bank. Meghan and David, welcome to today's program.
Thank you.
Morning,
Happy to be here.
And we hope to have Judge Cole join us here pretty soon. So Meghan, let's dig right in. Would you take a moment to share with the audience an overview of the REEM Commission and how it actually came to be?
Yeah, thank you, Carlos. Good morning, and good morning to you, David, as well, and to everyone on the call this morning. You know, we've actually been at this work for quite a while, and I would say, gosh, it was probably 2 years ago that United Way of Greenville County commissioned a really important study to help us understand the dynamics in our community, the data in our community, as it relates to primarily the African American community. And so we commissioned something called the Race and Economic Mobility Index to really help us understand things like health and education and jobs and the plight, quite frankly, of African Americans in Greenville County to help inform our investment strategies. And we were actually getting ready to release that report and had yet to release it. And then the murder of George Floyd happened in Minneapolis, Minnesota, my former hometown. And, you know, Carlos and I were actually on the phone on a Sunday chatting about that and just checking in as friends, and me really wanting to understand how things were going for him and how he was feeling. And gosh, Carlos, out of that phone call, we started saying we need to do something. As the leader of United Way, the leader of the chamber, we started dreaming about who else should be at this table, and very quickly came up with Pastor Sean Dogan, who is the interim president and CEO of the Urban League and also Long Branch Baptist lead minister there. And we started, you know, drafting a response to our community of this real need to do something as it relates to race equity. And I would say early on, we drafted this as a call to action, and then very quickly came to the conclusion, the call to action is actually to ourselves as leaders of these three institutions in our community. And so that was really how REEM was born, is the three of us in pretty deep conversation about wanting to make sure that Greenville, South Carolina did not become the next Minneapolis or the next Charlottesville or Atlanta or insert any other community in our nation right now. We wanted to be very proactive in our approach while also acknowledging some pretty deep roots in our community of racial injustice. And that's really how REEM was born. And Carlos, I think about some of those early conversations, we were like, gosh, who could we get to lead this as the stellar co-chairs backed by the Chamber and United Way and the Urban League? And very quickly surfaced David, of course, and Judge Merl, who has a long history. Both of these gentlemen have a long history of very thoughtful investments as it relates to race equity in our community. So that's really how it was born.
Yeah, Meghan, appreciate that overview. And we certainly have two great co-chairs with David and Merl at the helm. You know, I want to say one of the real, I guess, benefits of the formation of this initiative is that the the Chamber, United Way, and the Urban League, we each wanted to do something. But we realized that the impact could be so much greater if we partnered, if we didn't try to do it, if we didn't try to engage in this work alone. We felt like that the work could be strengthened and be much more impactful if we took this journey together. And I think that's one of the real beauties, if you will, of the REEM Commission. Would you agree?
I completely agree. I completely agree with that, Carlos. That's been, I think, one of the real highlights of it.
Good deal. So David, Meghan has provided an excellent overview of the REEM Commission. Besides the three partnering organizations, you and Merl, who else is involved with REEM? Give us a little insight on who's involved and how it's structured.
All right, I'll do. Thank you, Carlos. And again, happy to be here this morning. Love that you do this a couple of times a month. These are great programs, and I appreciate the leadership role the Chamber continues to take in this community. And Meghan, certainly United Way as well. And continue to be appreciative that both of you and Sean Dogan stepped up to start this conversation in our community and push us all into that uncomfortable place of addressing some of these challenges in our community and certainly challenges that exist across the country. I do want to check just real quick. Did Merl make it on? Has he made it yet? Or are we still missing Merl?
I think we're still trying to locate Merl.
I was going to say one of our biggest achievements thus far is that we've gotten Merl comfortable with Zoom, but apparently he's not quite as comfortable yet as we had hoped.
We anticipate his grand entrance pretty soon.
Got it. Well, and for everybody else on the phone, we've actually already had a REEM call today. We were together from 8:30 to 9:30 this morning in a standing meeting that we have. So in any event, so back to your original question, Carlos. So who is on the commission? So the commission is comprised of 35 individuals that come from all different backgrounds in Greenville County. We've got representation from criminal justice, the healthcare system, education, the business community, philanthropy, elected officials. So a really good cross-section of leaders from across this community. We're going to talk about it a little bit more in a second, but the commission is divided into 5 committees. We'll dive into that momentarily. And what I'm really excited about is within those 5 committees, we're actually starting to pull in other individuals within the community, folks who have raised their hand, subject matter experts in these particular categories. So that's helping us widen the net, if you will, and bringing more into this conversation. But, you know, listen, we could have invited 1,000 people to this conversation, and 1,000 people want to be at the table and contributing to this. We started with 35. We have to keep it manageable, but we're going to need everybody in this community as we start to get more towards the implementation stage. And we've had folks raise their hand and volunteer to get engaged. And so we'll be engaging more as we go. But for right now, we've got the 35 commissioners. We've also brought in some expert help, if you will. So each of the committees has a facilitator, a consultant that we have hired to help lead that work within the committee and provide some administrative support. And then also, as of about 45 days ago or so, all of you know Nika White. Nika is now serving as the lead facilitator for all of REEM. We realized a long time ago that we needed some help, right? We're all doing this as a a quote unquote part-time job, if you will, that really needs full-time focus. And Nika and her staff are now bringing that organizational expertise and certainly subject matter expertise to the table to help move this work forward in a more efficient and effective way. So we're happy to have Nika and her team at the table as well.
Good, thank you, David. And I'll just say we'll dig into this a little deeper later on the call. But I think when we started this, we anticipated a shorter term initiative. I like to call it, it's almost like a Gilligan's Island analogy, a 3-hour tour. But as you know, with Gilligan's Island, it lasted a bit longer than 3 hours. And so is this work that we're embarking on with the REEM Commission. We'll get into deeper detail and expand on that a little later. And I'm happy to announce the judge has joined us via cell phone. Judge Code, can you hear us? All right, we'll come back to Judge Code in a moment. Meghan, if you could, please take a moment and share with us some important data points and insights. I know, again, you talked about how United Way was engaged in this work prior to a certain level, prior to the formation of the REEM Commission. What data is being used to inform the REEM Commission's work?
Yeah, thank you, Carlos. You know, I mentioned earlier the Race and Economic Mobility Index was that key report that we continue to use with critical data points that inform our work in REEM. We also hosted many community conversations. So I think that's an important aspect of this also, is that we've really embodied the idea that, and really the work that the best ideas and information come from the communities that we hope to serve. So we engaged many leaders and community members in our work at United Way to inform some of this. So I do want to highlight a few things that came out of the REMI, as we fondly call it. All of this, of course, can be found on the REEM website, which is reemgvl.org. So if you want to dig into this a little bit more. But a few stats that I want to share that really informed our work at United Way, that of course is informing some of the work in REEM, that I think highlights why this is so important. Per capita income for whites in the city of Greenville is almost 3 times higher than for Blacks. Black household income is 56% of white household income. There is a persistent gender-based and race-based pay gap, with Black males earning 51% of white males. Female, Black, and Hispanic residents have higher poverty rates compared to male and white residents. In the upstate, 56% of the homeless population is Black. Black males constitute a higher proportion of detention center, jail, and prison inmates compared to their demographic representation. The infant mortality rate is twice as high for Black babies compared to white babies. 16% of Black babies are born with low birth weight compared to 7% of white babies. Low-income residents and people of color are at higher risk for food insecurity and lack access to healthy foods. 15% of Black workers do not have their own transportation to work, compared to 10% of white workers. I could go on and on and on. This is actually about a 136-page report that informed not only the investment strategy at United Way and our overall theory of change, but helped inform some of the work of REEM and continues to be a really important tool and resource that we use. Now, for those of you who know me, I am definitely a glass half full person. So I see this as an opportunity for us to create change and to stay after it for positive change. There were some positive findings in this also. The minority owned business rate in South Carolina is increasing, and 18.3% of businesses in Greenville County are minority owned. I actually think this is directly tied to the Chamber's stellar initiatives in this space that you all have been at for quite some time under your leadership, Carlos. So that's a real glimmer of hope. Of course, COVID threw us for a loop in so many ways over the past year. And I don't think it's any surprise to this group that African Americans were disproportionately affected in nearly every way as it relates to the impact of COVID-19, both from an economic standpoint and from a health standpoint as well. So I think it just puts a real exclamation point on the fact that this is more important than ever and certainly informs REEM. You're on mute, Carlos.
It's only been a year. Thank you for that, Meghan. David, we're going to come back to you for just a second. And if you could expand on our focus, the focus of the REEM of the REEM Commission's work. We've received several questions about who this work focuses on. And if you could spend a moment talking about that.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I'll mention, we've had a couple of communities come to our REEM Commission meetings, communities that are engaged in this work in some form or fashion. We've had Tulsa, Oklahoma, we've had Spartanburg just down the road, and we're talking to some other communities. And, one common theme is some of these communities have been at this for years, right? So Carlos, you mentioned that we started this, say, last August with an expectation that we would wrap up in December and kind of report out to the community. And again, communities have been at this for years, and even a 1-year extension is not enough time. We'll talk in a minute about what the timeline is, but look, we're trying to solve 400 years here, and we're not going to do that in 18 months. The other thing I'll just mention, so when you talk about our focus, we've kind of been building this as we go. Some of the commissioners are tired of hearing me use this analogy, but we're building the spaceship while we're on the way to the moon here. And so when it gets to what is our focus, let me just give you our vision and mission, which candidly, we just formalized about a month ago. We kind of started with a broad mission and vision, but we've really refined it. So vision statement today: a Greenville County where racial equity is absolute and prosperity is accessible for all in the Black community. Mission statement: to develop strategies and partnerships that eradicate race-based disparities and inequities impacting the Black community in Greenville County. We are in the process now of working with the commissioners to build out our value statements that go with the mission and vision. But the main point I want to make is in both of those mission and vision statements, we specifically are talking about the Black community in Greenville County. We are unapologetically focused on the Black community. We absolutely recognize that there are other challenges in our community, but this is the focus of the REEM Commission, to focus on the Black community and remove, and we chose the word eradicate for a reason. We want to completely eradicate these race-based disparities and inequities, many of which Meghan talked about that came out of the United Way study. So, Carlos, that is absolutely our focus and will continue to be our focus as we move forward.
Thank you for sharing that, David. I don't think we've identified yet the 5 key areas of REEM's work. So if I could take a moment to do that, and also say there are a lot of areas that we could have addressed, but I think it's safe to say we can't boil the ocean. But there were 5 key areas that we wanted to make sure that we addressed through the REEM Commission. We wanted to eradicate disparities in the following areas: income and wealth, education and workforce development, the criminal justice system, health and wellness, and community-wide learning. And the community-wide learning area is important because it was important for us to raise awareness throughout the community of how we arrived at where we are today. And so there's been a lot of opportunities, and will continue to be initiatives to learn more about the journey. And David, you mentioned 400 years worth of issues and disparities that we're trying to deal with. But that community-wide learning has been very important, and we're going to focus on those other areas that I mentioned as well. Judge Cole?
Yes, sir.
Hey, all right.
I'm delighted to be with you.
Well, I can't tell you how pleased we are that you joined us this morning, Judge. We spent some time providing an overview of the REEM Commission, kind of why we're doing what we're doing and who we're focused on. If you could you give us an overview on what has happened in the last 12 months that makes REEM so necessary and possible? What makes today and this REEM Commission different from past initiatives to impact our community?
in my opinion, the necessity for communities to figure out how do we live together in communities across this country? How do we function together? How do we grow together? How do we move forward on the issues that affect this country and the Black community in particular? We have tried to income and wealth and health and wellness and community engagement and education. All of those issues are issues that have plagued the Black community for hundreds and hundreds of years. I think the George Floyd incident was the impetus that drew the conscience of America to say we need to change. We need to think of ways that we can incorporate the Black community into the full citizenship. And how do we do that? What do we need to address? What systemic issues do we need to try to remove? How do we change, at least as best we can, the hearts and minds of those who may be have been affected by the George Floyd and other incidents across this country? We believe that the timing was right. And we believe America was willing to listen to what we believe to be inequities in our system.
Thank you, Merl. The time is definitely right. And we're convinced that we've got a great group of key stakeholders and leaders at the table to help advance this work and effectively address the disparities that our Black residents experience here in Greenville. So we think we're certainly on the right track. And this question is for the group. What has the REEM Commission accomplished so far? I know that if we've got 35 folks on the commission, we're each a bit impatient. And sometimes we get frustrated that maybe it seems that we're moving along too slowly, that we haven't accomplished enough. But I would contend otherwise. Quite a bit has been accomplished so far. Anyone want to weigh in on the work that's been done so far?
Carlos, I'll start, and then Meghan and Merl, please jump in. So as with any commission, particularly with a subject that is this deep, we have some who feel like we're not going fast enough. We have some who feel like we're going too fast, and we have some that feel like, hey, this is the perfect speed. And certainly one of the challenges of this body is to, number one, move this group together at the same pace and have everybody buying into what we're trying to accomplish, and then bring along a community at the same time. And obviously our commission is representative of the community. And so in the community, we're going to have people that say, enough of the talk, we got to get some things done. And then others who frankly say, I don't see these issues that you're saying are issues. We don't believe those to be the case. That's the fact, right? So we've got those two ends of the spectrum. So each of the committees that Carlos talked about has been charged with trying to determine 3 to 5 strategies that they can bring forth as a committee that address the disparities in the deepest way within their committee. And the goal is to have that done by, say, midsummer. Between summer and the end of the year, our goal is try to refine those strategies and be able to present to the community some of our thoughts about how we can address some of the issues in our community. That's easier said than done, okay? And we're learning that now as we get closer and closer to the self-imposed deadline of putting forth strategies. It's hard. And just like I said, we could have 1,000 people at the table. We could have 1,000 different strategies. But as Carlos said, we can't We can't focus on them all. So how do we, as a commission and as a community, agree on what those most important strategies are that we focus on first? The other thing that we as a commission have really bought into is we don't want this at the end of the day to be a fancy binder that goes on a bookshelf somewhere, and that 5 years from now we look back and say, well, that was a good exercise, but you know, nothing ever came of it. We're committed to making sure that doesn't happen, and we'll talk about what the future of REEM may look like in a minute. But we are focused on making sure we bring forth strategies that we can hold ourselves accountable and hold others in the community accountable for accomplishing. So that's, you know, and again, Carlos, I'll let Meghan and Merl jump in on things that we've accomplished, but you know, that's kind of the guts of what we're trying to accomplish as we get from last August to this coming December.
Good. Thank you, David. Meghan, Merl, anything to add to David's commentary?
One of the things that has impressed me has been the buy-in from the Greenville community on the mission and vision and our intent to change what is in Greenville. For me, what has been most important are the phone calls and the emails that we've received from citizens across this county who say, how can I get involved? What can my company do? What can I do to be involved in this mission? So for me, what have we accomplished if we've done nothing but put the spotlight on what we have always known are issues, but whether or not this community was willing to address them. And I believe that, in fact, we have reached that tipping point of our community says, let's do something special here in this community.
Excellent point, Merl. And to that point, there's a question in the chat. Is there a mechanism in place for openly accepting public input on the needs to address and our ideas for producing systemic change? Is there a platform for accepting that public input?
So Carlos, I'll jump in. You know, there are two questions that popped up also that I think are relevant to what we just talked about. So Kara, to your question, that's one of our big discussion points right now as a REEM leadership team is how do we create space either as part of our community-wide learning cohort or more generally with REEM to gather important feedback and in some cases buy-in and understanding of what that means. So yes, I would say expect that to be one of the outcomes that you'll see of the REEM Commission of how we do have a deeper platform for that kind of engagement. So I think that that's a really important aspect of this that will help us as a community grow and make sure that we're making real progress. You know, Carlos, I want to mention a couple of things just to sort of put an exclamation point on what you said and what David said and what Merl is highlighting. You know, I think that the weight of what we're trying to accomplish in REEM as a community is so important. And David, you mentioned we don't want the report to be shelved. I sometimes think of that as the autopsy report, right? We don't want to spend all this money and all this time creating a really beautiful report that looks at the past exclusively and all the things that we should have done, could have done, but didn't actually have the courage to do. So I really appreciate that this commission has been very focused on those courageous next steps. And I'm also reminded of what John Simpkins shared with us, that this is learning in public, right? It's different than other topics. There's a lot of weight and trauma and history and learning and just a lot of politics in a lot of ways wrapped up in this. And so really being able to stay the course and have the stomach to do that is so important. And then really meeting people where they are. Karen Baines-Dunning, who's a brilliant commissioner and has a really wonderful career nationally in a lot of these issues, said to me recently, Meghan, one woman's stretch is another woman's yawn. And I thought that summed up so brilliantly where commissioners are, because some people are like, let's go, chop, chop. There's some urgency and there's some of that in the community as well. And some people are like, wait, I don't understand this, or why should it be this way? Or what do we have to learn from this? And that's tough and wrangling around this issue. But I do get a lot of encouragement to Merle's point that so many people have raised their hand and wanted to pitch in. Scott, to your question directly, one of the things that that David and Carlos both mentioned in the setup of these subcommittees, that's exactly what we're trying to do, is to identify, what are those key levers in each of these areas that we can pull on for real systemic change. And so that's really what the commissioners and those committees are charged to do, is to come up with those 3 to 5 items that can help us make real progress in those spaces.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Megan. And today we spent some time this morning on our leadership call assessing a matrix to help us, once we receive the many recommendations that we will, how do we decide which 3 to 5 for each key area that we'll focus on, and that will not be easy. That will be challenging work, because we've already heard a lot of great ideas, a lot of great strategies and things that need to be addressed. But in order for this to be effective work, we're going to have to focus and narrow down those ideas. And of course, we welcome more ideas as well. So we certainly welcome anyone on this call and folks throughout the community to keep the phone calls and the emails coming. We love your ideas. I'm going to take this. I'm going to ask this question, and I'll also be the first one to answer the question. I've been asked why the chamber is involved in this work. I've received comments that said that's not in the chamber's. It's not in the chamber's wheelhouse. We have no business being engaged in this work. But my response has been that engaging in this work, not only is it the right thing to do, is it the humane thing to do, but if we can figure this out, it's going to be great for our economy. It's going to be great for business as well. The more people that are healthy, it's good. The healthier people are, the better that is for our community. The fairer our criminal justice system is, that's great for our community. When people are in a position to accomplish their dreams professionally, socially, and personally, all those things are good. All those things are good for our community and great for our economy. So the chamber really had no choice but to engage in this work. Judge Cole, Merl, David, why do you all think that engaging in this work and embarking on this journey is good for the community?
I've been fortunate enough, Carlos, to have served on the board of the Urban League, on the board of the United Way, and on the board of the Chamber of Commerce. I suggest to you that those missions are not incompatible to our mission today. Mm-hmm. If you look at the underlying principles upon which these organizations are founded, it is to grow the community. In the Chamber's aspect is the business community. What I have said for so long is that Black folks have been underutilized in the business of business, and we should be incorporated. And if we do, we are stronger Greenville, so the Chamber should be involved. Urban League's mission is to make certain that, in fact, all of the issues of racism, whether be it systemic or individual, are rooted out as best we can under the laws that currently exist. That's the mission. United Way is involved because it is supposed to lift those up from wherever they are to where their talents and abilities ought to be able to take them. We want to make sure that the least of these have funding and a way to come out from where they are. So for me, these three organizations galvanizing to address this issue is apropos.
As always, Judge, well stated, well stated. Merl, Meghan, David, anything to add?
Megan is stalling on me because neither one of us ever like to follow Merl.
True.
I can't say it any better than that. I will just kind of maybe just boil it down to, look, our community is comprised of small business owners. And let's just think about this at a small business level. The more people in our community that have the opportunity to be successful, the better your job applicant pool is, the deeper that pool is. The better our community is, better off our community is, you get more customers. Those are more taxes. You can kind of follow this along. This is absolutely a moral imperative, period. But it is also an economic one. And I don't have the dollar amount, and I'm not gonna estimate it. Mm-hmm. But the economic impact of bringing this community where it could be and should be would be significant. And I'm not talking about millions of dollars. It's probably in excess of $1 billion. And Carlos, you may know that number.
So David, I am going to share one data point that may resonate with our folks on the call. So each year, the per capita income is measured in communities across the country. And per capita income is exactly as it states, is how what are the earnings, what's the average earnings per resident in your community. And Greenville County, as great as things appear when you walk up and down Main Street, Greenville County is at 89% of the national average. We are well below the national average in terms of average income. So you say, big deal, it's only 11 points. Well, you take that 11 points and you do the math based on 500,000 people, and it results in $3 billion in economic activity that we're not experiencing here in Greenville County. $3 billion. I don't know how many folks on this call have got an additional $3 billion to throw around, but that's real money. David, you're a banker. $3 billion, yeah. Is that real money?
Yes, that's real money that can go a long way in this community.
It can go a long way, but through this work, we're uncovering why that gap exists. It exists because too many people in our community, they're not as educated as they could be. We're not as healthy as we could be. There are barriers that are precluding people from achieving their best selves. And if we can eradicate those disparities, if we can close those gaps and make more people more eligible, better prepared for those opportunities, that per capita income goes up, resulting in a much better community. Didn't mean to spend so much time on that one, but perfect. That is a hard number. We can make serious impact economically in our community.
Carlos, it reminds me actually of the conversation that the Chamber and United Way and many leaders in the community had several weeks ago with Tom Barkin, who is the chairman of the Federal Reserve in Richmond. And, he was very interested in meeting with the REEM leadership specifically because of the increased role that Federal Reserves are playing around the country in social issues that have the opportunity for strong economic impact. And I was really struck by one of the things that he said during our lunch, that of the footprint that he's responsible for in the Southeast, South Carolina is the highest for importing talent instead of growing talent. And I think that really came out loud and clear in the REMI study when you look at education attainment, overall sort of high school graduation rates, et cetera. So to me, there's a real opportunity around investing as early as possible. I often say prenatally, because I think that's where it really starts from an important perspective, all the way through high school graduation and post-secondary attainment, so that we can have a stronger talent pipeline that's possible for South Carolina and for the upstate.
Agreed. Thank you, Megan. So, question for the group: where do we go from here? What's next?
All right, I'll jump in on that one. The candid answer to that question is we're still trying to figure that out. As I mentioned earlier, we have asked commissioners to engage with us until at least December. There will be plenty of work beyond December that needs to happen in this community. What form REEM takes is still an active conversation, right? So is it its own entity that we stand up and it focuses on this moving forward? Does it become a part of an existing organization? Does it become part of the city or the county? Anyway, there are tons of different options, and we're trying to figure out the best place for REEM to exist going forward that continues to champion this work, and probably most importantly, hold the community accountable, particularly for those strategies that we think are important and that we as a community put forward and agree are important. So we've got to have REEM in a go forward strategy to hold us all accountable. So stay tuned. We certainly would appreciate any feedback in that regard as well, but that is an active conversation as we continue to move towards December.
Thank you, David. We have, in the words of one of my favorite poets, Robert Frost, we still have promises to keep and many miles before we sleep. But this is fulfilling work. It's necessary and important work, and we're committed to it. Merl, Meghan,
yes, sir.
Any other thoughts on kind of what's next for us?
I think the only thing that I can think of at this stage, Carlos, is that next is the community engaging with us, making sure that this is a community-wide approach and that we have your ideas in terms, when I say your, the community's ideas and empathy, so that we can move forward together to make this the greatest community in this country. I think we have the capacity, with the personnel that we have, with the impetus that we have, with the financial structure that we have, with the faith leadership that we have, with the business leadership that we have, and community leadership. We have all of the ingredients to do what's necessary to make certain that this county, at least, is in step with the 21st century.
Agreed, Merl. Megan?
I don't think I have anything to add on that front, right? Other than what Merl and David have said so eloquently.
All right. A couple of comments from the chat. We've got a couple of folks commenting on the $3 billion opportunity that we've got here in our community as we try to figure this out. I'm glad you all appreciate that data point. Engaging our younger citizenry is going to be very important as we move forward as well. Hopefully, our younger folks, they'll have a lifetime in this community that's longer than mine. I turned 53 last week. I may have a few more yesterdays than I do tomorrows. But if we get this thing right, folks who come after us will have much better outcomes here in our community. I want to encourage you to follow the REEM Commission on Twitter. When we started this call, and by the way, REEM, we just launched our Twitter account last week. But when we logged on to today's call, we had 1 follower. I posted a note in our chat. We've picked up 2 more, so we're up to 3, but we've got close to 60 people on this call, and I know each of you have a Twitter account. So if you could go to Twitter search for at REEM GVL and follow Twitter just so you can stay up to date on what's going on with Twitter. We also have a website that's reemgvl.org. Please, periodically visit that website for updates on information and what have you. And as always, man, feel free to share your thoughts. We got to have full community engagement in order for this to work, in order for this to be effective. So never hesitate to share your thoughts. I want to thank Meghan, David, and Merl for joining us today for the call. Very insightful. You provided some information that most folks were unaware, and that's great. And we commit to doing a much better job of keeping you updated of what's going on with the REEM Commission. I don't know about you, but last week, I did not celebrate the verdict in the Minneapolis incident. I did not celebrate Derek Chauvin's conviction. I was overcome with an overwhelming sense of relief that we seem to be on the right. That's an indication that we're on a better path. But we still have work. We still have work to do. And one of the key priorities of REEM is around social justice. We still have work to do. Meghan, you tend to be the glass half full person of our group. If there were words of hope that you could share before we end today's call, what would those hopeful words be?
Two things are giving me hope right now, Carlos. One is, and Judge Code touched on this, the fact that we have so many people who have raised their hand and been passionate about this work, wanted to learn more, wanted to participate, wanted to do their part. That hasn't waned even as we've figured this out and honestly sort of had some stops and starts along the way. So that gives me a tremendous amount of hope. And the other aspect that gives me hope is young people, right? I think that the movement that we are seeing in communities here locally and around the country of young people working very hard to create a different future, that gives me an immense amount of hope.
Thank you, Meghan. David and Merl?
Very briefly from me. Let me make sure I'm not muted. Yeah, very briefly from me. Leadership matters. Our experiences over the last few years nationwide has indicated to all of us leadership matters. And in this community, I want to personally extend my gratitude to Meghan and to Carlos and to Sean and to David and all of those who've undertaken the leadership role to make certain that we bring Greenville County to where it should be as it relates to how we treat one another. I'm excited. You talk about hope. I was born in the 1940s. Those of you who were not born yet have no idea what that was like. But I will tell you, I am encouraged about 2021 and beyond. From where I've come from to where I think we've got a chance to go. Thank you so very much, all of you.
Thank you, Judge. David?
All right, Carlos, the fact that you started with Meghan and said that she tends to be the glass half full, I guess means that Merl and I are the glass half empty. And I didn't think that was the case, but
No.
In any event, I'm gonna reiterate something that's been said a couple times because it really is important. When I think what excites me about this and gives me hope, the number of people who have raised their hands in this community since we started this conversation last August and asked, what can I do? How can I be engaged? Is really overwhelming. And I wish we could put every single person to work immediately, but the number of people that have stopped me, have stopped Merl, Meghan, Carlos, Sean, and others and said, thank you, what can I do to help? Has really been inspirational. In the last few weeks, I have seen 2 sermons that were virtual sermons sent to me, and I watched the link where REEM was the main conversation in that sermon. I mean, that they built a sermon around what we're doing with REEM. All of us, Carlos, Meghan, Sean, Merl, and I have been invited to countless meetings similar to this to talk about what REEM is doing. These are conversations that just were not occurring this way and this intentionally prior to the formation of REEM. So while we have a long road ahead of us, while we've got to really do some hard work with strategies and everything else, I continue to say that simply the formation of REEM and shining a light on this conversation in this community has made a significant impact and probably beyond what any of us think it has. Lastly, I'll say there's 50 plus people on this phone, and I see a lot of familiar names, and all of you are leaders in this community. I'm going to ask of you to continue to follow this work and help us champion this work. Yes, we need your feedback, but we also need you to be a cheerleader and a champion for this work, because you all touch a lot of people in this community, and we need as many cheerleaders as we can get as we move the work forward. So again, Carlos, appreciate being included in today's conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And again, thank you to each of our panelists. Thank you for everyone who logged in today for today's call. We certainly appreciate your engagement. And again, we need your thoughts, we need your ideas. So please send them our way. In closing, I want to encourage you to do 3 things. First of all, if you've not been fully vaccinated, please make sure you get vaccinated. We still have a ways to go to become a more healthy community and recover from this pandemic. So if you've not already done so, please get your vaccine. Encourage your friends and family that may be on the fence to get their vaccines as well. While we're getting vaccinated, please continue to wear your mask. And that's very important, because we're not out of this thing yet. And then finally, have a great week, unless you have other plans. Y'all take care.